Good morning, everyone. As part of the TERA Fellowship Program, today I shall be speaking about teaching and learning languages in today's realities, problems, challenges, difficulties, and possible solutions. I will share with you the PowerPoint so that we can communicate better. So, before we speak about challenges and difficulties, I believe that we first must take stock of the current scenarios and analyze what is happening around us, as this has direct implications both for the teaching as well as for the learning of foreign languages. We live in a world where being able to interact with people from around the world is critical to our success. There's a crucial need for competencies in more than one language. Apart from cognitive, academic, and behavioral benefits, foreign languages give job seekers a cutting edge. And research is clear. Foreign languages are critical to productivity for future generations. An important sub-objective of the Lisbon strategy states that there is a need to improve foreign language teaching at all levels of education throughout Europe. Over the past 2 decades, countries in the world have become ever more interdependent, and existing borders have been erased. Multilingualism is internationally gaining positive support and is viewed as an educational goal by many countries. This has brought about a situation where foreign language teaching and learning has become more necessary than ever, not simply for linking with the rest of the world, but above all for producing active citizens, able to function in today's ever-shrinking world. Good communication skills in foreign languages has never been so important and necessary. On the other hand, however, we are living in a time characterized by uncertainties, even where foreign languages are concerned. A lot of what we took for granted about language, culture, intercultural communication in itself is not what it was when I, and maybe some of you, entered into the field as a foreign language teacher. Teaching methods have changed. Our modes of communication have changed. The way people speak and interact with each other has changed. Even the scope of learning a foreign language has changed. To be monolingual has become the exception in the world, as almost everywhere today, people can communicate in their native language plus a second language. Now, to be better able to meet these changes, a large number of countries have moved from a system of foreign language teaching designed to educate just a few to one of mass education, and this required a transformation in the meaning and the orientation of the work of language teachers. Such rapid and profound social changes have not only increased the number of foreign language teachers, and they have not only increased the number of foreign language students and brought about complex and intriguing problems related to quality in teaching and learning, but they have also deeply affected present-day teaching methods and approaches. Notwithstanding all this, we still need to go a very long way. The European Survey for Language Competencies, which seeks out to assess students' ability to use language purposefully, has found that language competencies provided by educational systems still need to be significantly improved. There is an overall low level of competencies in both first and second foreign languages among students in all participating states. And despite a growing recognition that proficiency in at least one other language is advantageous in today's world, a lot still needs to be done. Even the report from the thematic working group, Languages for Jobs, IT 2020, in this report it is stated that the demand for foreign languages and communication skills is steadily rising on the European labour market, and there is a need to reduce the gap between offer and demand of language skills and increase the motivation of learners. And there is a need for new methods of teaching languages which are more learner-focused, more practically oriented, and above all, more applied to professional contexts. In today's world, if foreign language teaching is to be successful, it is important that teaching systems and programs are continuously remodeled. And to be able to respond to these evolving needs and to be able to remodel and create new programs of study, it is pertinent to ask ourselves three vital questions. Why is it important to know who our students are? The second question is, what are the main challenges and difficulties that need to be faced and overcome by teachers of foreign languages in order to successfully motivate their students? And the third question is, where do we want to arrive? Now, the social changes that have occurred in recent years compel us to adapt to new social, cultural, and linguistic realities. Young people's language use, their way of doing things, their way of studying today is very different to what it was some years ago. So if we do not keep in mind who our students are, their characteristics, their way of doing things, their study habits, we risk running a situation where we honestly believe that our message is getting through. We are convinced that our teaching is effective, when in fact, learning is not taking place, or rather, only a fraction of what we are trying to teach is being learned. So, it is very important to know who our students are, and I will only mention some very basic characteristics of today's students and how these impact our teaching. The first characteristic is that given the absence of parents for various reasons, students need emotional and cognitive filters. Now, we all know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how important it is that students have the basic needs in order to be able to maximize their educational paths. The second characteristic is that they have access at a very early age to unlimited information and to unpredictable virtual experiences and relationships. Now, this in itself might sound positive, but the problem is that very often students do not have the skills to determine and distinguish between what is true or trustworthy and what is not. This might lead to situations where students compare what is being taught in class during lectures to what they have found over the net, which might not be precise and correct, with the consequence that they start doubting which is the correct source. A third characteristic of our youth is that their main means of communication is digital. Now, we all know that the language used when we communicate on the social media, the way we write, etc., is at times totally different from the language we use and find and teach in classrooms, the language we find in textbooks, for example. The fourth characteristic is that they come from different countries with different backgrounds and learning experiences, and their perception of the world varies immensely. And this means that their needs vary, and at times it becomes extremely difficult to communicate in class with all the students at the same level. Today's students are what I call the digital natives, in the sense that their way of communicating and organizing their free time is very often closely linked to the Web 2.0. Now, the Web 2.0 gives students the opportunity to share, to interact, to be dynamic, to participate, to be co-builders. And this means that they have a very intimate relationship with technology. And if we have to look at some of their most common characteristics, which have a direct impact on their way of learning, we see that they are multitasking, they find it hard to concentrate for a long time, they prefer shorter texts or input, and they are used to visual stimuli. Now, if the Web 2.0 is more than a social resource and a technological tool, and this I believe it, and if by learning a language we mean learning how to interact in that language and being fully immersed in a continuous changing context, then the Web 2.0 is innately ideal for language learning, given that the social web is a network of persons and contents with the aim of interaction using language and a whole set of connection and relations between contents and persons. Today's generation is the generation Alpha. And if we have a quick look at some of their basic characteristics, we soon realize, for example, that they have never seen the world without technology. Their hands touch a tablet before they touch a pen. Every thought and action is immediately shared and transferable. They learn how to share a photo before they speak. The family may no longer be of different genders. At the age of 3, they already know how to search for information. And at the age of 4, they can write and most can read. Now, all this has very serious ramifications on the way these students learn, the use of technology in our teaching approaches, and the way we communicate with them. And this brings us to the second question. What are the main challenges and difficulties that need to be faced and overcome by teachers of foreign languages in order to successfully motivate their students? Unfortunately, due to time constraints, I cannot enter into the everyday challenges that teachers of foreign languages have to face in class, like, for example, classroom management, motivating students, meeting all the needs of the students, analyzing and identifying the best techniques to teach with the student what the students need most, learn how to use in the best possible manner the technological resources available. Instead, I will focus my attention on what I consider are 4 closely knit challenges which are fundamental to success in our profession. The first one of these is multilingualism, what I call multilingualism versus monolingualism. This does not mean speaking only one language, but thinking in only one way. That is the Google way, the Facebook way, the internet way. Despite the fact that students have learned another code, they are not necessarily learning how to think differently. This is quite a challenge, especially in the foreign language class, because students might offer resistance to change, the way they write, the way they express themselves, etc. The second challenge is keeping the pace with language change. Now, to keep the pace with language change has always been a difficulty, but with social media and the net, this has become a much bigger challenge, given that language is changing at a very fast pace. Now, this is happening for 3 main reasons. The first one is the internet which is fostering new experiences faster than ever before. If up to some decades ago, it used to take a generation to accept or introduce a new word, today, all you need to do is put a new word or phrase on the social media and everyone starts using it immediately. Now, the challenge for teachers is that they have to keep pace with this, given that quite often the language of the students in everyday life is not the language that we teachers or educators know. The second reason for this is the globalization of the language. We just cannot tell our students that there is one kind of language, one kind of English, one kind of French, one kind of German, etc. Because as soon as they go out into the world or in the country where that language is spoken, they will surely realize, listen, encounter with another kind of language, which is not the textbook language. And the third reason for this, which is closely linked to the previous 2, is current trends. A few examples. In 2019, we saw the birth of the word Brexit. 2020 arrived bringing with it a lot of fun words with the prefixes COVID and Corona. For example, Corona babies, COVIDiots, Quarantini, which was a drink to enjoy during Saturday movie night at home because of lockdown. We also had the noun mask mutate into a verb form, as we were told to mask up before entering places. So unlike once upon a time when Shakespeare introduced new words, today the mantle has been passed on to the youth of the day, and thanks to TikTok, they became extremely popular around the globe in a very short period of time. New words like twerking, flossing, dabbing, etc. have become the order of the day. Now, the third challenge is exposure to the various varieties of language. There exist so many varieties of the same language. The challenge is that while it is important to retain the respect of the traditional accent or language, it is equally important to make students aware of other varieties. In the context of individuals who seek to communicate in a second language, one of the main taxing aspects of communication is being able to interact fluently with people with different accents. Not understanding what someone else is saying due to accent differences often leads to embarrassment, rejection, or misunderstandings, and this gives rise in students to frustration and lack of self-confidence. This could be done by encouraging students to improve their reading and listening comprehension skills by exposing them to texts of as many different varieties as possible. Emails, chat lines, newspaper articles, academic writings, SMSs, internet articles, book excerpts, etc. And this brings us to the fourth challenge, the philosophy of the classroom, or rather, the assessment procedures within the classroom. Now, the philosophy of the classroom should be to expose students to as many different varieties as possible, but we must be careful with examinations. They are very much conservative because, as a rule, examining boards are notoriously conservative. In fact, there exists a discrepancy between what needs to be done and what we usually do in the classroom because of assessments, examinations, etc., and what the second language acquisition and applied linguist experts are suggesting, that we need to reflect in our teaching what's really going on in the world in terms of multilingualism, truncated repertoires, translingual practices, etc. One of the challenges that poses a heavy burden on language teachers is in fact the strong monopolization of the testing organizations to the assessment policies. For example, standardized assessment has been leading the world assessment policies at the expense of classroom-based assessment, such as assessment for learning, assessment of learning, learning-oriented assessment, dynamic assessment, and formative and summative assessments. Now, excuse me, okay. Why is all this important? We have to keep in mind that nowadays, learning is not solely confined to the classroom during the prescribed hours of our lessons or lectures, but students have infinite options outside the classroom hours to further their learning. Online courses, MOOC, chat rooms, online resources, YouTube, etc. Even smartphones can be and apps can be of great help, both in class and outside of class, if used correctly, as we shall see in a minute, but they can also create problems, especially if not used correctly. And even the term teaching or learning a foreign language has changed, or rather its meaning has changed, and there are various interpretations. We used to say it is important to know a language. So teaching and learning focused on grammatical notions, vocabulary, etc. And then we started speaking about knowing how to use the language. So it's language proficiency, applying the notions and concepts in real-world settings. And then we spoke about knowing how to be. With increased mobility, immigration, emigration, etc., learners need to learn not just the language, but also how this is applied in the way they act, they think, they react, they behave. And now we speak about knowing how to learn. This brings us to our third question, the where. Where do we want to arrive? And the answer is that we want to transform our students into autonomous learners. What does it mean? Now, first of all, we also need to be aware of the challenges faced by the learners themselves in the foreign language classroom. And very often, these challenges are frustration, which is often the result of their having studied the language for a number of years and still feel they are still not confident in communicating with it. They do not feel the need for the language, so there is no direct relevance to everyday life. Lack of opportunity to practice the language, so technology can come in very handy here, podcasts, YouTube, internet, etc. And lack of self-confidence. Is this the way I should say it? What will the others say? How will my teacher judge me? So positive feedback becomes essential. And the main characteristics that make an autonomous learner is flexibility, motivation, relevance, feedback, active participation, and task-based teaching and learning. And some very important aspects that help students become autonomous learners is that the material we present has to be practical and relevant, varied in nature, novel and original, self-chosen, and challenging. And it is also very important that we give our students a sense of achievement, a sense of success, by giving them positive reinforcement and positive feedback. Very strong tool I find extremely helpful to help students overcome their challenges and become autonomous learners is translanguaging. As you know, unlike code switching, code mixing, or code mashing, translanguaging is the savvy interweaving of different languages by the same speaker in the course of the same utterance as if they were one language. It is an effective plurilingual strategy where students can use a variety of languages in their linguistic repertoire, giving rise to an integrated communication system. It is flexible as it always allows students to use words from different languages in the same sentence. And in this way, the communication process is not interrupted while the cultural diversity of students is respected. Now, this helps natural communication to take place, where emphasis is not on the form of the students' utterances, but rather on the messages they are conveying and understanding. To do this, the teacher needs to entice linguistic curiosity and enhance metalinguistic awareness. This helps students become not simply two monolinguals in one person, but rather individuals whose language includes features which can be phonological, morphological, syntactic, and pragmatic of all the languages they speak. Thank you so much for your attention.